Hey guys, if you're just joining, I am about to go live here in a couple of seconds as soon as all the streams are up and running. And we have a short agenda today, but hopefully, really, really exciting stuff has been going on all of this week. So I want to talk about all sort of the minutia and the details that are going on in the reconciliation bill. Remember, it is not done yet; it's still in negotiation, right? And I want to talk about what's called Striketober, about worker strikes around the country, as well as shortages that have been talked about. So we'll talk a little bit about that and what's going on and why it's happening, right? And then, of course, I will give you the Texas update. The third special legislative session is now over. It ended officially, I believe, on Tuesday of this week. Redistricting is over. We know what the U.S. congressional districts will look like. We know what the House districts will look like. We know what the Senate districts will look like. And I'll give you a quick update on what all happened other than just the redistricting. Lots of exciting news. So if you are just tuning in, hang on. And hopefully you'll enjoy all the information that we're going to discuss. So instead of covering a whole bunch of topics, I am basically covering a couple of key topics this week, and hopefully it'll be a little bit more meaningful. And these are topics that we should all be aware of. So let's get started. So the first thing we want to talk about before we get started is I'm Donna Imam, and I'm running for U.S. Congress in Austin, Texas in the 2022 cycle. So if you are watching this for the very first time, I do a 7 p.m. Central Time stream every Thursday evening, and I bring to you what's going on for the entire week. And then on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Central Time, I host what's called a Twitter Spaces. So I open it up to anybody for questions, comments, or just if you want to share your story. And sometimes it's a small group of people, sometimes it's a large group of people, but we get to hear from people what they're actually going through. And it's a wonderful learning experience from others. I do have some topics ready, and I open it up for topics that you might want to discuss. So if you are on Twitter and you're following me at Donna Imam TX, you will be able to join that Twitter Spaces every 9 p.m. Central Time on Mondays. And of course, on Thursdays, I'm here streaming on YouTube Live. If you haven't subscribed, do subscribe. If you like the broadcast, then you should like the stream as well. So let's talk about what is going on in the reconciliation bill. So last week, I discussed quite a little bit about what I love about the reconciliation bill. Now, remember, the reconciliation bill does not have a lot of things that I am a huge advocate of, namely healthcare coverage that covers every single person. The reconciliation bill doesn't go so far as to cover every single person, right? But there are lots of other things in here that is extremely essential for working families, especially the bottom 50% of our country. And these things will really make a huge difference in their lives. So I went over all the things that I love about it. Of course, there are things like student loans, for example, which are going to start up again really soon. Will people be able to actually pay them with all that's going on? There are lots of challenges that we need to solve that are not in the reconciliation bill, but let's at least talk about what is in the reconciliation bill and how it can help working families, not just in Texas, but all across this country. So these are some of the things that we've been talking about, universal pre-K. This is for 3 and 4 year olds. We're talking about permanent child tax credits, expansion of Medicare to cover, hearing aids, eyeglasses, and things like dental work, which can be really, really expensive. Lowering the prescription drug prices, which many Democrats across this country have been running on, basically allowing Medicare to be able to negotiate drug prices so that we are not paying 2.5 times, 10 times, 20 times more for the exact same prescription drugs that everybody else in the world has available to them at much cheaper rates, right? So this is a huge deal, and it really, really impacts a lot of people, but most importantly, people who are 65 and over. There's climate mitigation, provisions in this bill that are extremely important, especially if you're following what is going on and the damage from climate change and the repercussions from that are going to be something extremely devastating, and we will not be able to fully reverse climate change. We're talking about mitigation now. That's where we are. We're talking about also things like paid leave in here, which most working people who work 2 to 3 jobs, even if they work up to 60 hours a week in multiple jobs, unless you work for a major corporation or maybe the federal government, you wouldn't get paid leave. And this has been a huge topic of discussion because Secretary Pete Buttigieg took paid leave to bond with children that have adopted, and the GOP has been very critical of that, even though that is something that is essential to every single family to be able to get paid leave to take care of their family. Because at the end of the day, we all work to have a better life for our family, to spend time with our family, and to enjoy our life here on this earth. And so this is a really essential thing that people who work in hourly jobs do not absolutely get. And unless you work for a major corporation, you may have never gotten paid leave or have the ability to get it. But it's a game changer and it's a life changer for working people. And of course, my absolute favorite out of the reconciliation bill is tuition-free community college, which I discussed in length last time, saying how important it is. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about how important this is as we talk about Striketober, because this became part of the discussion today, and I'll share that with you in a second. So what is happening with the reconciliation bill? So this is just posted, a little over an hour ago by one of the reporters out of Capitol Hill. And he reports that the House Ways and Means Chair, Richard Neal, met with Senator Sinema, he's talking about here, and called it a very cordial conversation. She's in on renewables. This is a quote, so this is actual things that are happening. She is in on the issue of child credit, and she is in on family medical leave, and that's the way she ranked them. So this is good news that she's in on these things. What we've heard in the past is that Senator Sinema has been opposed to prescription drug price lowering of that. Number one, that has been something that's come up multiple times, but it seems like she is on board with the other parts of the reconciliation bill. However, this week was full of drama between senators in Congress. So there were some, conversations between Senator Bernie Sanders, who is the budget chairman of the Senate right now, Budget Committee Chairman. And so he's playing a leading role in getting the reconciliation bill formulated and across the finish line for Americans across this country. However, as we have spoken before, Senator Manchin has been opposed to many of these programs. So he said pick 1 out of 3 at one time. Another time he said that he does not see these items in here, specifically things like the child tax credit, should be allowed without a work requirement, right? So he wants stringent means testing. One of the things that came up that he wanted was that he wanted a minimum, a maximum pay of $60,000, where a family earning any more than $60,000 basically wouldn't get this child tax credit, right? And here's the problem with that. $60,000 in a rural community in a small town may be sufficient to get by. It's definitely not a thriving wage for a family, if you think about it. If you have a family of 4, $60,000, you're barely kind of getting by. You're bringing in less than actual $5,000 of usable money after you pay your taxes and your FICA taxes are removed. If you get $60K, you know how much that is, right? That's very limited amount of money to raise a family on. Now, imagine making $60K in a major big city like San Francisco, New York City, or one of the top 10 cities, right? Or even in Austin, Texas. If you make $60,000, you're barely getting by. You definitely can't afford a home, and you can't afford childcare on $60,000. It's just not possible. So this cap of saying that you should only be giving this ability to get child tax credits, which is right now somewhere between $250 to $300 a month. That's a credit. It just gets deposited in your account and you have that available. So if you're a family of 4, let's say you have 2 children, that could mean $500 a month. That really is helpful towards your grocery bill, for example. And I've said this over and over again, that when you take this away and you put an absolute maximum work requirement, then you are taking this benefit away from working families in large cities where $60,000 is not even enough to survive on. They can't even afford an apartment in the city. They have to live 2 to 3 hours away. They're commuting 2, 3, 4 hours a day just to be able to work and take care of their family. And that's why it is so important for us not to have a cap and not to be means tested. Now, some of these things are already means tested, but Senator Manchin has been very, very opposed to just giving child tax credit without any kind of testing. So when we talk about all of this, then what Senator Bernie Sanders has been doing is he's been going around the country talking about what is in the reconciliation bill so that Americans understand why it is so important to them, just like I've been going over it with you guys. Now, he wrote an op-ed in one of the major newspapers in West Virginia, which is the state that Senator Manchin is from, and he explained what is in here in this reconciliation bill and why it would help American families, because West Virginia is actually a very poor state in the sense that people who live and work in West Virginia in general have a low income, and they're very much struggling to raise their families, and their opportunities for job growth and being able to really live a full life is very, very limited. And what Senator Sanders did after he did that, this made Senator Manchin somewhat irked, I believe. And so they had some tense meetings over this week, and this was reported. Now, the sad part of all this is, as you all know, that I am a huge advocate of education, because this is a way for people to really climb out of poverty, to get high wage jobs, and to bring real change in their families. Sometimes not even just their immediate families, but across the entire family. When you have the first person that goes to college and gets a high wage job, they in turn reach out and help, their parents, their other siblings, and it really has transformational change in many, many different families. So one of the things that Senator Manchin is now saying this week is that he does not support free community college. And of course, there were some language, exchange between them that is almost, even difficult to talk about. The BS word has been thrown around and the F word has been thrown around in these closed meetings, but they have kind of escaped into the wild. So, before we go on to where we are, let's just look at the article that is on there. So there's multiple articles. Politico wrote this article earlier today. You can see here Senator Manchin and Senator Sanders had a blow up, but it helped unstick the Dems agenda. So having these conversations has really changed. So one of the things this article specifically talks about is talking about this tuition-free community college. So you can see here that this article says that Manchin laid out what he could accept to Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's team. Universal pre-K was in, he said, but no tuition-free community college, right? Senator Sanders was not pleased. I'm obviously not pleased because, as you know, community college is a big deal. And I'm going to go into a little bit more why, and I'm going to give you a really great example to show you why tuition-free community college makes a huge difference. So, of course, there's obviously some language here, interesting language here in this article. But shortly after this blow up in a meeting, Senator Manchin and Sanders met privately. They even posed for a photo together, and they publicly reconciled. So let's hope that some of this does get back in there. So you can go read all of this article. One of the biggest challenges, however, is this original $3.5 trillion target price really has been scaled down. So we've heard that it's going to be between 1.8 and 2.2, and so there's definitely a lot of back and forth in this. And of course, this is over 10 years. Some of it's upfront, but it's over 10 years. And there's another story here, again, reporting on this heated closed door, event that happened, and what is actually happening between them. So between the two senators, they're trying to come to an actual understanding of this bill and agree on a bill. So again, I'm going to share this tweet with you. This was shared a little bit earlier today, and you can see that they are talking about Representative Jayapal. And Representative Jayapal is the chair of the Progressive Caucus. So the Congressional Progressive Caucus, also known as the CPC. And what she is saying is, look, is this falling apart? Is it getting further apart? And she's saying, no, I don't think so. This is just how negotiations work. Not everything you hear is true, and it will just take a while to put together, but I still feel good. So what is the result of all of this? These are the key things in here that will make a huge difference to working families. So if you do want to take action on this, it is absolutely important for you to call your representative, especially if you have a Democratic representative or you have a Democratic senator. So if you're watching this from West Virginia or Arizona, you want to call your senator because they do have staff and they will listen and they represent you. That is their job, to represent you, right? That's precisely their job. So if you have a Democratic senator or a Democratic representative, it is really important for every single one of us to make a call and say, we want to see all of these things in here, not only because these are completely paid for, but more importantly, these are huge investments in the American family, and the return on these investments are boundless. They are boundless. Senator Manchin has no idea that investing in people's education is going to change the trajectory of this country and people's lives in the ways we cannot imagine. We absolutely cannot imagine. And I'm going to go into a little bit about that education piece as I talk through today. But that's the best thing that we can do right now. We can make it very clear that these are very important things. And these are not extravagant things that we're doing for American families. We're talking about childcare. We're talking about solving child hunger here, giving them these tax credits. We're talking about universal pre-K, which is shown to be amazing for children as they grow up and become young adults. We're talking about lowering prescription drug prices. This is research and development that we as American taxpayers have already paid for. Right? And we're paying again. We're basically subsidizing the entire world by ensuring that big pharma has huge profits. And it's very, very important for us to ensure that Medicare can negotiate these prices. So these are extremely important things that we should all care about and know what's going on and advocate for. And so if you haven't heard of what's in the reconciliation bill, it's important for you to spread this, share the video, let people know what's in there and why it's important. So we are in October. And it is important for me to let you know that we are just a little over a week over from Halloween. So as you know, a lot of kids, might have missed Halloween in 2020. So it is very important that we stock up on candy for Halloween and make sure that we have enough there for all the kids. So I'm just giving you a reminder that it's coming up. And if you did buy your own candy stash and have been eating into it, remember to stock back up before the end of the month so that you can be ready for Halloween. So I just wanted to let you know. But on top of that, we want to talk about worker strikes and shortages. So around the country, and if you haven't been following this just became mainstream news just this week. There are actually thousands of people across the country that have been on strike. And so today, The Economist talked about Striketober, which is a way of talking about all the workers that are going on strike. American workers take to the picket lines, and this is a photograph here of UAW workers that are on strike. But more importantly, I believe that these are some of the 10,000 John Deere union workers that basically assemble John Deere products. And they've been on strike for several days now. In addition to that, in Kellogg's factories, so cereal, if you eat cereal in the morning, that's Kellogg's factories. 1,400 people in Kellogg's factories from around the country have been on strike. 10,000 from John Deere, as I explained. More than 20,000 nurses and workers in California and Oregon with Kaiser Permanente, which is a healthcare company, have voted to strike. They haven't gone on strike, but they've voted to strike. We're talking about 20,000 nurses and healthcare workers. And about 60,000 behind the scenes film and TV workers were also set to head to the picket lines, but I believe that has been averted for now. That's at least the last point that I heard. Their union, I believe, is... I'm not exactly sure how to say it, but they have a union and they had voted to strike. But we're talking about, close to tens of thousands of people around the country in various areas that are striked. So it made it to The Economist. And of course, this week, PBS News and the sort of public news stations also talked about the growing number of U.S. workers on strike. And so what is actually going on? Why are workers going on strike? As well as we're hearing there's worker shortages. Now, there was a really interesting article this week about a guy who basically applied for a bunch of, I think he applied for 2 jobs per day. These are low-wage jobs, hourly jobs. So he applied for 60 jobs in a month. And then he did some analysis of how many people called him back. I think he reported that he got 1 call back. And on top of that, he got some emails. But he had a very difficult time finding a job. One of the examples that he gave, and I'm going to bring up the article here if I can find it. But one of the articles that he talked about is where a job had... basically advertised $10 an hour, construction cleanup job, and it was part-time. But they wanted you to be available full-time, so they could call you at any time during the week to come work part-time. You had to be on call. It was $10 an hour. On top of that, when he went to actually get the job, they offered him minimum wage, which was $8 and some cents, instead of offering him the $10 wage. So I don't have this completely pulled up, but let's see if I can find this real quickly for all of you. It may come up here real quickly and see. Here we go. So, there's actually an interview with this person. So this is a actual video here, but let's see if we can find an article where we can read through it together. And here we go. So let's go look at this together. So here we go. A Florida man applied for 60 entry-level jobs in a month to prove the so-called labor shortage is a myth. And I believe his name is Joey Hulls. He said he was inspired to apply for 2 jobs a day the entire month, which is what I reported, and the entire month of September by increasing coverage of the so-called labor shortage. After hearing several local business owners complain that they can't find employees for hourly work, he set about this experiment. And then, of course, here's his Twitter, and it kind of went viral here. You can see he's got 18,000 likes, probably. I think he's posted on Facebook rather. And he saw a discrepancy between the rhetoric of employers and the facts on the ground in Fort Myers. So that's where he is. And this is where he talks about he continued to find jobs tied to owners who publicly complained about a lack of applicants. He said that he only received 1 interview. He applied for 60 jobs and received only 1 interview, at which point the business owner attempted to walk back the $10 an hour offered in the listing. And he says, are they desperate for help? Yes, according to their lamentations on Facebook. But so far, after 1 interview, after 58 applications, says you all aren't just desperate for workers, you just miss your slaves. He concluded on Facebook post that has since gone viral. So there's the article that I just talked about in terms of worker shortages. So what he's really saying is that workers are facing a real problem. there are jobs out there. They're extremely low paid. They're not full-time. They have no benefits. There's no health care. There's no sick paid leave. And if you have children, you can't afford to get childcare and work in any of these jobs and cover the payment of the childcare. So you can see this ridiculous assertion that we don't have enough workers. What we have done in this country is, for a long time, we have been very willing to, for example, pay people who own space for rent when you're going to put a retail space in, for example, or a restaurant. We don't complain about the rent for that. We say, well, rent is going up because real estate is expensive and they have to pay their mortgages, right? But we don't say, when we talk about workers, that people need to be able to survive and live. Sure, you can hire someone on $10 an hour. Where do you expect them to live? How do they pay their bills? It's impossible to do in most major cities, but even in rural areas, you have to be able to afford to live and survive and get up in the morning and get to work on time. And this is the big challenge that's been happening for a long time now. So today, Bloomberg had hosted a Twitter Spaces. So this is what, by the way, what a Twitter Spaces looks like on your phone. So if you haven't joined one of them, I highly encourage you to join Twitter and participate in some of these conversations that's happening on Twitter. And they talked about Striketober and what's behind the labor crunch. And I participated in this conversation. And one of the things they were talking about is, why is this happening now? Is it because of the pandemic? Is it because it was something that was already happening? And what many of the journalists concluded here is that working conditions for many people had been getting very, very bad prior to the pandemic. For example, people had no say over how many hours they worked. Many people in union jobs were working even 12 to 16 hours a day on their feet, and they had no control over what hours they could work and they couldn't work. Many of them were being forced to work up to 6 days a week continuously, long hours. We're not talking about 8 hours. We're talking about 12 hours. We're talking about 16 hours. That's extremely exhausting. And for pay often as low as $40,000 in any large city, which is completely unaffordable to raise a family on. So this is the conversation that's been having had. And now workers are saying, we can't take it anymore. And why are they saying that? Because during the pandemic, they saw huge companies like John Deere rake in billions of dollars in profits. John Deere is an enormously profitable company, but they're refusing to pay their workers a salary that's good enough for them to be able to survive. And even in union jobs, what they've done is, if you joined a union, a decade ago or 2 decades ago, you would get a certain salary. But if you joined, a week ago or 2 years ago, you would get a salary that is an hourly wage that is much, much lower and not livable. And they created these tier systems between people who are wage workers, union workers who started several years ago versus union workers who started, decades ago. They created other tiers. For example, salaried workers would get a little bit better pay. And then of course, management gets better pay. And of course, upper management is getting stock options and they're sharing in the wealth of the company. And CEOs are getting hundreds of times more salary, stock, benefits, millions of dollars in total income with respect to the people who are working at the bottom tier of the company, working in manufacturing jobs. So you can see the disconnect between those workers and people at the top. And take into account this, that you cannot get any product or service out the door without those people that are working on the floor, whether they're unionized or contract workers or they're Amazon warehouse workers. They're essential to be able to make billions of dollars in profits. And they should have an absolute stake in the profitability of that company. They should be able to share the profits. And of course, when workers have a bigger say in the company, when they share in both the good times of the company, the profits of the company, they tend to be much more responsible. They're much more loyal, and the productivity of that company is much bigger. So the conversation that I had, and here After this Twitter Spaces conversation, Bloomberg Opinion quoted me that even if you want to work in some of these manufacturing jobs, you often need these advanced skills and automation that people graduating from high school do not have. Quoted by me. Now, what did I say that in context to? I said it in context to the fact they were talking about what are the policies that could really make transformational change in the United States. And one of the biggest policies is 2-year tuition-free community college. And the point that I wanted to make is this, that even if you offer 2-year community college, not everybody will avail the entire 2 years. You can actually take a few classes and get certifications. For example, at Austin Community College right here, you can get what's called a Manufacturing Skills Standards Council certification, MSSC certification. It's offered by the community college. It's several classes. It doesn't even take the full 2 years, but all of a sudden now, because it's tuition free and because it's part of community college, you can now get a high wage job in manufacturing in the United States, because there are some manufacturing jobs coming back to the United States, but they're highly automated, which means the equipment that's used in those manufacturing spaces requires skilled workers, people who can use complicated equipment, program them, and be able to debug them when they go down or when they fail. So you need a special skill set. This skill set is not offered in high school. So you absolutely need to go to community college. But many people do not know that. First of all, they don't know that. Second of all, they can't afford that. So that is a big deal. It's a huge game changer. And that is the point I was trying to make. This is this kind of stuff that Senator Manchin needs to be aware of. And when people say things like, I don't support that, it shows how disconnected they are from our new economy and what we need to do as a country to be successful in the next generation. And this is a quote that I want to end with, that nearly even 11% of wage and salary workers in the U.S. belong to a labor union in 2020, and it is down from 13.4% in 2000. The point I want to make here is very simple. Unions in the United States have weakened significantly over the decades, and that has been done because of various policy not allowing people to unionize. As you know, earlier this year, late last year, Amazon warehouse workers tried to unionize, and Amazon was vehemently against that because it cuts into their profitability. But not having these workers available consistently and, doing their job as needed affects the company. They're essential to the billions that Amazon makes, and they must have the ability to share in the profits of Amazon, John Deere, and other companies out there. It is important for us to stand together with every single person. And one of the things that I tweeted out earlier today is that salaried workers must stand with hourly workers and contractors and other people that are maybe making lower wages than us. We must stand with them, because at the end of the day, we are just workers too. We may have a slightly better salary. People who have salaried jobs, people who have jobs which are quote unquote white collar, which are quote unquote professional jobs. Yes, you may make a bit better salary, but at the end of the day, you are a worker just like them. And if all of us workers do not come together, the product is not successful. So every single working American in this in this country deserves to be able to share in the profits and the wealth that they create and that they're essential to. And with that, let's go to our next topic, our Texas update. So what is the Texas update? So as you know, Texas had its normal legislative session earlier this year. And after that, we had 3 special legislative sessions, which is somewhat unusual for Texas, especially given the last several years where we did not see that. So in the 3 special legislative sessions, a lot of things have happened. Mainly 3 big things have happened. Number 1, there was a voter suppression bill eventually passed. Texas wanted to make it harder to vote and make it more difficult in terms of voting by mail, really penalize things that are maybe honest mistakes. And the Texas Democrats of the House, they left Texas. They tried to break quorum to stop that bill. Eventually, they had to come back, and that bill was passed. that happened. That's number one. It's, I believe it was called Senate Bill 1 eventually when it passed in the special session. That ship has sailed. Number two, there were bills on what we call the heartbeat bill, which is basically taking away reproductive rights from Texans. And I've covered this multiple times, but basically now there is a bounty on anybody who helps anybody get reproductive health care, and it can be enacted by anybody in the state of Texas or outside of Texas. You can be literally in any country in the world and sue somebody in Texas for attempting to get reproductive health care. And this is now being fought in the courts. But in the meantime, Texans do not have the ability to get reproductive health care, to meet all of their healthcare needs, and are having to go out of state to meet their healthcare needs. That's the state we are in Texas right now. The third big thing that happened is redistricting. So Texas, the population increased significantly. We got 2 new U.S. congressional districts. In fact, we are the only state to get 2 new districts. And our campaign had been predicting that we will get a completely new district in Austin. That happened to be the case. So Texas's 37th district emerged in Austin, which takes up a majority of Travis County and a portion of Williamson County. That new district is now real. And as well as that, there is a new district in Houston, which is Texas's 38th district. The 37th district is Democratic leaning, meaning what they've created is a sync district where they've packed in all the Democrats in order to give the GOP current incumbents long, big runways for the next decade so they can continue to win due to gerrymandering. So Texas is gerrymandered and Austin is sliced into 6 pieces, just like a pizza. And 5 of those pieces are represented by extreme right-wing GOP Congress members. They used to win these elections with 20, 30 points, so double digits in the beginning of the decade. Towards the end of the decade, they were winning them in low single digits. And so to shore them up, to gerrymander their districts further, they created the sync district in Austin. In addition to that, House district maps were passed. There was gerrymandering there. There were Senate districts were passed, and there was gerrymandering there. In fact, the population of Texas, 95% of the growth of population of Texas, as reported by the Texas Tribune, was by people of color. However, the districts do not represent that growth appropriately. So if the growth is in people of color, primarily 50% of that growth was Hispanic growth in Texas, Hispanic, Latino, but primarily Hispanic growth. And the other 50% was Hispanic, Black Americans, Asian Americans, Latino Americans, etc. But that's the growth. And so we have extremely gerrymandered, even more gerrymandered than you could possibly gerrymander Texas any further. That has happened. All of that now sits on the governor's desk to be signed into law, and we expect them to be fully signed into law. We expect all these districts to be challenged in court. In fact, there are already lawsuits have been filed against this U.S. congressional map, alleging that the Latino vote in Texas has been diluted with these U.S. congressional maps. Nevertheless, the special session is over, and these maps are on Governor Abbott's desk, and they are ready to be signed. So that is the Texas update for you in terms of what is going on in the Texas legislature. And of course, this entire special session has been extremely horrific for those of us here in Texas that want to see good policy. And a lot of that, journalists have attributed to the fact that Governor Abbott is being primaried by extreme right-wing candidates, and he is basically giving in to their requests in trying to make Texas a very extreme state and enacting policies that will eventually negatively impact all Texans across the state. So that's where we are on the Texas update. And before I leave, I want to give you a couple of quick updates. I have some really awesome news, and I really also have a few updates for you that you should keep in mind. One is right now we have an election going on. We're in early voting here in Texas. The vote date is November 2nd. However, we have early voting going on. There are multiple constitutional amendments on this ballot. In addition, in Austin, Texas, if you live in Austin, Texas, there are several ballot provisions on here as well, propositions rather. And one of the ballot propositions is to basically increase the number of police officers per 1,000 people in Austin, which will cost somewhere around $100 to $120 million annually extra. There's also conversations about other municipal employees will have to be laid off in order to accommodate for that, but there's no data being provided to show why we actually need that. Now, 9 of the 10 Austin City Council members have advised that we vote no way on Prop A, including the mayor, Steve Adler. He is also saying to vote no way on Prop A. The initiative is Proposition A. So what I ask you to do is this. First of all, if you are a registered voter, tomorrow is the last day. Friday is the last day to ask for a mail-in ballot. If you're 65 or older, anybody can get a mail-in ballot, so make sure you get that in, number one. Number two, go out and vote if you're a registered voter. Look up your ballot online. So if you're in Travis County, you can look it up, Travis County elections website, Williamson County election website. It's very easy for you to do. Look it up, look at Proposition A before you vote on it. And again, the recommendation is no way on Prop A because there's no data. There's no data to show what this will do and whether Austin actually needs it. You can also go see what all the Austin council members are saying about it, including the mayor, and why they do not support it. So that is a very, very important public announcement that I wanted you guys to know. Again, November 2nd is election day. Early voting is going on right now. So if you want to avoid, the mad rush to vote in a off-cycle 2021 election, go now. Get it done. Go vote. And I want to end on a very, very positive note. So today, University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley has increased to their cap on family income to $100,000. So if your family makes $100,000 or less, they're offering free tuition and fees to those students of families that have family income of $100,000 or less. Now, it used to be $75,000. At UT Austin, it is $65,000. And you do have to keep a certain GPA. So you have to, keep up with your work. But this is an amazing example that if UT, Rio Grande Valley, is able to do this, any public university in our country should be able to do the same. Being able to offer education, higher education, the cost of education should come down to nothing because technology should drive the cost of education down to zero so that anybody, no matter what they want to do, whether they want to take a few classes in college to get some, expertise in a certain area, or they want to just grow their skills, or they want to get a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, we should absolutely do everything in our power to make that available. And we can do it. And universities are doing this to show you that it can be done. And this is a huge investment in our next generation. So I'm a huge advocate of this to show you that talking about tuition-free 2-year community college is not a pipe dream. It's being done right here in Texas. If your family income is at a certain level or lower, they're offering that to children here, young people. So this can be done across the entire United States. I'm very excited about it. I'm very hopeful about it. And I believe that we here in this country can make this happen for every single person in this country. So with that, I want to thank you for tuning in. I hope that all the topics that I've covered today were interesting and hopefully added to your understanding of what's going on in the reconciliation bill. Let's hope that all of those things pass, because we do need it for working families in the United States. And with that, I want to thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful evening, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week and week.